Hi, welcome to the next episode of Aaron Talks. This next episode is going to be split up into two parts, a part one and a part two. The reason, because, well, recently I was talking about my favorite guilty pleasure movies online. As a result, I was thinking to myself, I've got a lot of guilty pleasure movies I could talk about. So, here are my top 20 guilty pleasure movies of all time. At number 20, we have a film from 1988. Now, what's interesting about this film is that it's actually a film that stars a musician primarily. Now, I'm a huge fan of this musician's work. In fact, I'm sure plenty of you out there probably are. That said, this movie scared him away from ever becoming a film star, I'm pretty sure. While he's popped up in other movies over the years, I'm pretty sure this one is the reason he doesn't pop up terribly often. What movie am I talking about? UHF, starring Weird Al Yankovic. Now, while the film itself is harmless enough and, in my opinion, really funny, it was panned by critics and didn't do very well at the box office. Now, all that said, that doesn't mean that you have to just throw this film away and, think, oh, well, that's garbage. No, in fact, I would say the opposite. I think this film has not only got some really great stuff going on in it, but you really have a chance to get to know the characters in the film. And yes, it's silly, it's goofy, it's zany, it's everything Weird Al Yankovic is. That's part of the reason I love it and part of its charm, which is why it is number 20 on my top 20 guilty pleasure films of all time.
Do you believe this? Oh, will you look at that? Oh, just call me Mr. Butterfingers. I think it's on the floor somewhere. Oh, is my face red?
Now, next up on the list is a film from the late 90s, mid to late 90s, Spawn. Now, recently, Todd McFarlane announced he was going to be rebooting Spawn on the big screen, and he'll actually direct it this time. That's interesting. I can't wait to see how that turns out. However, the 1997 adaptation, while interesting to say the least, is not exactly Oscar-worthy fare, nor is it held high in the pantheon of comic book movies. More along the lines of something like, say, Mortal Kombat. It's definitely a dated piece of 90s nostalgia for someone like me who grew up reading the comics. Now, my thing about Spawn the movie and why I love it as much as I do is some of the performances in that movie are so hammy and over the top that they make that movie so good to watch. The first one I want to talk about is Martin Sheen's performance. He plays this, ruthless, corrupt businessman who's, just a terrible guy. And he plays it with such relish that you just get the feeling that he would really be this kind of guy if he could be, or that he just knows how to channel these kinds of guys. I don't know. But he's really fun to watch in that role. The other role that really stands out in the movie, and I'm sure most of you know who I'm going to talk about next, John Leguizamo. That's right, Luigi himself as Clown. Now, first of all, if you don't know me, I freaking hate clowns. I hate them with a passion. But with that said, John Leguizamo is absolutely phenomenal in this role. He really makes you just, if you've already got a phobia of clowns, this is not going to help. You're not going to sleep for a couple of days afterwards, I feel like, because he's just so creepy and annoying at the same time that you find yourself going, okay, could you please cut to something else? Get him off screen now. So, next on the list, number 18, we have Rock and Roll High School from the late 70s. Now, late 70s, the Ramones were one of the biggest punk acts in the world. Now, punk rock had really only just come along a few years prior to this, and Roger Corman, a low-budget producer, said, hey, let's make a punk rock movie starring those kids from New York, and that's exactly what they did. Now, is the movie good? Not necessarily. Is the movie charming as all hell? Oh, hell yes. And if you're a Ramones fan, you can't help but love this movie. Not just because the Ramones are in it, but because so much of their music is in it. This movie feels like it's infused with the spirit of adolescent angst that early Ramones songs definitely reflected, even though they were in their 20s, I believe, when they actually started doing this. Point is, if you really enjoy movies that have like a driving soundtrack, you'll love Rock and Roll High School. Now be prepared, it is very low budget and cheesy as hell, as I stated previously. So that's number 18 of my top 20 guilty pleasures.
Next, I investigated reports of loss of hearing by individuals due to the high decibel level involved in playing rock and roll music. Put on these ear protective devices, as I am going to, Mr. McCree, play a song by the Ramones at the decibel level consistent with that used in your average concert. Your standard mouse and your standard speakers. Now back. This is the rockometer.
Gee.
It is used to measure comparative rock and roll intensity levels. Watch the mouse while I turn it on. Notice the loss of hearing.
Now, for number 17, it's another musical, but not in the vein that Rock and Roll High School is a musical. No, this time around, we're talking a good old-fashioned musical. This one is Reefer Madness, the musical. Now, if you're familiar with the old black and white film Reefer Madness, it's pretty much that, except it's a musical rendition. And not only is it a musical rendition, but it's a musical rendition that you will find yourself singing along with after the first couple of viewings. It's really fun and has actually started a lot of midnight showings around the country, from what I understand, featuring a lot of shadow casting, which is something that's very popular thanks to things like Rocky Horror Picture Show. So if you really want a fun, high energy, and I should also point out, it stars Kristen Bell of, Veronica Mars fame, who's currently, working for Disney with Frozen and Frozen 2. So that's the thing. You want to see her in one of her earlier performances around the time she was doing Veronica Mars, check out Reefer Madness the musical. It's not only a lot of fun, but I think you'll probably wind up loving it as much as I do. So,
I assume worthy parents like yourselves have photos of your kids in your wallets, right? Could you take them out now and look at them? Fine-looking young lad. Why, she's the spitting image, isn't she? You all looking carefully? Good. For those pictured before you are the designated targets of a deadly assassin. An assassin of youth. A new drug menace destroying our children in alarmingly increasing numbers. Marijuana is that drug.
Number 16 on my list is Mortal Kombat! Ding, 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 ding. That's the end of that. I'm not going to do that anymore. But the point is, if you love that music and if you love that game, then you know exactly what this film is. It's cheesy as hell, and let's face it, it may not be a great movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it's probably the closest video game adaptation we've ever received, at least in my opinion. It certainly beats the hell out of anything modern that's come out, and it definitely beats the hell out of something like Resident Evil. So if you want to have a great nostalgia trip and want to hear one of the best techno songs ever done, definitely check out Mortal Kombat. 15 on the list is 1992's Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Now, I've already talked about how much I love the television series Buffy the Vampire Slayer on this show. But here's the thing, guys. I think that even though the show is vastly superior to the movie, that the movie has got a lot of really funny stuff going on in it. Now, first thing you need to know, if you're a fan and if you're a Joss Whedon purist and you just like the TV show, that's totally fine. However, there's some interesting behind the scenes dynamics that if you're not familiar with this movie, you should definitely understand before going into it. One thing is that the script was rewritten behind Joss Whedon's back while they were in production. Another thing is that they didn't get what he wanted to do with the movie, which was basically make a tongue-in-cheek serious horror movie that had comedic elements, much more like what he did with the show rather than what they wanted to do for the movie. So, all of that kept in mind, you need to realize that the film itself is not at all what Whedon wanted it to be. In fact, rumor has it he actually walked off the set in the middle of production and never came back. So, this movie is a lot of fun. It's got some charm to it, and it's got a pretty good cast for the most part. Donald Sutherland being among my favorites, although Joss Whedon said that he was something of a, well, let's just say jerk to deal with. So, if you enjoy Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the TV series, you should definitely check out Buffy the movie. Now, next on my Guilty Pleasures list is something that I feel like some people would argue whether or not it's a Guilty Pleasure movie. I personally think it is. But it's the late 70s grindhouse classic, The Warriors. Now, if you can do this, I haven't been able to do this yet, but if you can do this, get a hold of a copy of it before they came out with that director's cut edition, because they tried to play it up as though it always had ties to comic books and that kind of thing, but from what I understand, the original doesn't really deal with that at all, and it was just something that the studio did because comic books are so big at the time, or so big nowadays. So try and get a hold of a copy of the original version, and if you're in the mood for what I consider to be a really charming sort of science fiction, post-apocalyptic, Mad Max kind of world, definitely give The Warriors a try. I think you'd really enjoy it.
Warriors, come out to play. Warriors.
Now, number 13 on the list is Teen Wolf from 1984. Now, if you're not familiar with Teen Wolf, this is the movie that Michael J. Fox was filming when they were scouting locations for Back to the Future. It's a tongue-in-cheek, well, it's not really tongue-in-cheek, it's a werewolf comedy movie. I mean, that's the best way I can describe it. I enjoy the film. It's got a lot of love from, diehard cult classic fans. Most people kind of scratch their heads at why you would like such a thing. Personally, I just think it's a lot of fun. That's why I like it. So if you guys want to check that one out, I definitely would recommend it. It's a great movie. I don't think I'm steering you wrong there. But check it out and tell me what you think.
These waves are mine.
We'll all be planning out a route we're gonna take real soon. We're waxing down our surfboard. We can't wait for June. We'll all be gone for the summer.
is Space Invaders from the early 90s. Now, I don't recall there being any particular stars in this movie that anyone would recognize off the top of their head. However, that said, the actress who played Lex in Jurassic Park is the lead little girl character in this movie. Space Invaders, if you're not familiar with the film, is a low-budget science fiction family film that I want to say Touchstone Pictures made in the early 90s. Basically, the idea is that these small little aliens that, they're basically little green men, they come to Earth and they don, they kind of blend in with the crowd because it happens to be Halloween the night that they invade. Now, the movie itself is very cheesy, and there's a lot of one-liners and some really just, bad puns and that kind of thing in it. But it's a lot of fun, and it's one that I personally really enjoy. I actually remember seeing this movie in the theaters when it originally came out, so give you an idea of how old I am and how old this movie is. So, give it a try. Maybe it's something that's, right up your alley. It's a lot of fun for me, and it's definitely something I enjoy.
Oh, give me a home where the asteroids roam, and the plebes and the fuzzy mugs play, where gravity's low, and the water is snow, and the desert winds blow you away. Mars is my home, where everyone's short just like me. I wish I was where there's not so much air, and two moons could smile down upon me.
Last on the list for this first part is another musical, but more in the vein of Rocky Horror than Reefer Madness is. So this one is Repo, the Genetic Opera. Directed by Darren Lynn Bousman, who directed like 3 of the Saw movies. This is an interesting film to say the least. It stars Anthony Stewart Head and so many other people, too many to name, but if you're a fan of horror movies, you probably would recognize a good chunk of the cast. Now, all that said, this movie is basically a rock opera, which is why it's called Repo, the Genetic Opera, and it's basically all about how, in the future, people are sort of addicted to plastic surgery, and if you can't pay your plastic surgery bill, well, then the Repo Man will come and collect the body part that you had augmented. So if that sounds interesting to you, definitely check this one out. It's definitely a guilty pleasure. It's something that if I ever bring it up in conversation, people kind of look at me funny. So, check it out. And so, if you like this video and you want to see the next part, don't forget to click that like and subscribe button. And of course, don't forget to hit that bell icon so you can be notified next time Aaron Talks has another episode uploaded. And I'll see you next time.